Welcome to Animation Hustle, where you can get your daily dose of animation inspiration. Like, comment, and subscribe, and check out the description for links. This is why Disney's best animator quit the company and never drew again. Disney has changed a lot over the years, but they did something that this artist couldn't stand.
I quit the dream job.
Do you agree with her reasonings? So this is Ellen Woodbury, and she's a Disney animation legend. She started out as an assistant, but her work was so good that she quickly got promoted. Here are some of her characters. Do you recognize them? Eventually, she became the first female supervising animator at Disney, which is a big deal. She created Zazu from The Lion King and Pegasus from Hercules. She even worked on movies like Chicken Little and Meet the Robinsons. She was one of Disney Animation's best animators, so why did she quit? Well, it's actually really simple. Disney changed. They stopped making hand-drawn movies. At first, she liked CGI, but after a few years, it became boring, so she left.
So I was a computer animator for 5 years. I was tremendously into it. Somewhere along the line, it occurred to me that it was more fun to be a sculptor. So in 2005, I quit the dream job and I reinvented myself as a stone sculptor.
So one time, Miyazaki absolutely roasted this kid's art, but in the process taught him a very valuable animation lesson. Back in the day, while working on one of their films, all of the new artists at Studio Ghibli were asked to create drawings based on the theme of eating. All of the artists do their thing and eventually pin their work up for Miyazaki to look at. It's his response to one particular artist I think is interesting. First, he looked at the art and then immediately noticed something. Instead of saying what it was, he had the artist sit down in a chair and act like he was eating. And Miyazaki encouraged him to make an observation. Unlike in his drawing, there was a lot of space between him and the table. This is what Miyazaki is best at. He's really good at observing real life and putting it into his art. He thinks all animators need to be good at one thing, which is making observations. Another time he encouraged observation was years later while working on his first CGI film. In a similar situation as before, the artist was tasked with showing him some of their work. The scene was of a little creature coming to life for the first time and looking around. While the first take might look fine to us, Miyazaki saw something that he wanted to change. The character's movement wasn't authentic. He explained that the character's head was moving around too fast and too focused. Newborn babies don't have that much dexterity. So for the next take, the animator added more childlike movement, and it turned out way better. Miyazaki is an animation master. I don't have to tell you that. One of the things that always stood out to me was how he always pushes new artists to be better. If you are a big Miyazaki fan and kind of want to learn how to animate like him, there's actually a document online that shows how he animates walk cycles and stuff like that. It's a really cool resource because it goes into the timing and the drawings that it takes to make a character move Studio Ghibli style. The Little Mermaid is obviously a classic. It has great characters, great music, and of course, great animation. The movie came at a time when Disney really needed a hit, and they had some of their best animators working on it. We had Glenn Keane and Mark Henn for Ariel, Andreas Deja was doing Ariel's dad, and Ruben Aquino on Ursula. Matter of fact, if you go to our Instagram, you can check out a post about Ursula and you can see how his early thumbnail drawings translate to the final animation scene. It's really cool. So obviously the movie did well. It went on to win some awards, a bunch of money at the box office, and of course, to eventually become the inspiration behind everybody's favorite level in Kingdom Hearts 2. The movie has tons of big, iconic moments. The whole part of your world sequence is great. Anything with Sebastian is hilarious. And I always like the effects animation. The lighting, the rain, the thunder was all really cool and cinematic. Despite all the big, amazing scenes, Walt Disney's daughter herself was really impressed by one particular small moment in the movie. It's this scene right here. It's quick and you might not even notice it, but it definitely stood out. I'll let the animator Mark Henn explain why.
There's a scene where when she overhears, Prince Eric is going to marry Vanessa, and she reacts to it. And it's all, there's no dialogue, there's not even a lot of heavy breathing, but it was all in pantomime.
I remember one of our previews, Roy Disney's wife, Patty Disney, she was just so impressed by that scene of Mark's.
It's crazy to think how that small little animation moment stuck out so much. I've watched the movie tons of times and honestly never really even noticed it. But now that I'm watching it, there is a lot of really cool, subtle facial animation and pantomime going on there. This Bob's Burgers animator really gets into character. He runs into trees, falls off couches, and freaks out in a Santa hat, all in the name of creating great art. So this is Aaron Humiston, a total beast who works as a 2D animator. When he's working on a scene, he will film himself acting out the action and copy that footage to make his animation even better. This turns into this, and this turns into this. A lot of work goes into making even the smallest animated moments, and Humiston shares the dedication he has to the craft. All of his animation is super cool. A lot of people don't know that there are some jobs for animators in America working on TV shows. Animating for a show like Bob's Burgers is really competitive, so I can totally see why he has the job. All of his characters have so much personality, the movement's great, even the subtlety in a lot of the stuff. I could geek out about this stuff forever. This Gumball animator just made the coolest animatic, and you need to see it. Her name is Eva Figueroa, the same artist that became world famous for being one of the lead animators on Gumball. Her work on the show is super awesome. Just check out her reel. I mean, come on, look at this. Once Gumball sadly came to an end, she switched over to being a storyboard artist working on a bunch of other different shows. And in her free time, she made this amazing animatic. She posted it on Instagram and got thousands of views. It's about a cop falling in love with a robber, so it's a simple story, but the way she did it is pure genius. As you can see, the drawings are great. And also, it's super funny. You can definitely see some of that Gumball humor in there. It's got some action with a huge runaway car chase, and even a little dance fight. If you love Gumball, you're definitely gonna love this, so you have to check it out. The sequence has a great soundtrack, which I can't play here on YouTube, but I definitely recommend going over to her Instagram to see it. But before you go, I actually asked her about this animatic, and here's what she had to say.
Do you just do this because it's fun, or do you think it's helpful to keep your skills up?
Both, because I had a couple of weeks between jobs, and I was listening to music one day while walking back home, and it was like, I had an idea. Like, I had the idea for the animatic I did, and I want to do this. It's funny. It's funny. I've been doing this ever since I was a kid, a teenager, imagining things to music. I'm sure a lot of people do it. And it always struck me as I was walking, like, I'm a storyboard artist. I can just do it now. I don't have to dream about this anymore. So I both wanted to do it, but I had also been wanting to do something for my own portfolio. You know how it is with TV shows, where you can't really show a lot of what you do, because maybe the show hasn't aired yet, or maybe you're not allowed, or maybe it was for a pitch that never made it, so you can never ever show it. And I was like, I want to do something that's my own thing and just be able to show it without asking anybody. So both, I think it's good for me, and I really wanted to do it. And I do a first pass. First, I do a very, very rough pass in blue to remind myself, like, this is not the definitive product. This is just a very rough approximation. And then I tried to get that done as fast as possible, just to be able to show it to Juanpe. And then, to get the feedback, like, do you get what's going on? Is it readable? Do you have any feedback? And yeah, once that was done, I just, scene by scene, like, clean it up, make it clearer, add some jokes.
The camera work and the shots, it was funny. Like, even watching with the sound off, it's just hilarious. You get the story, and that always, on that animatic, you made it look easy.
Oh, that's so kind. It wasn't.
I still can't believe Steven Universe came out over 10 years ago. I was an intern at Cartoon Network at the time, and I just remember all the buzz around it when it first dropped. It's such an iconic show for a lot of people, so I thought it would be cool to take a look at how an iconic scene from that show was made. So Joe Johnson, a lead artist on the show, broke down how this balcony-side musical number came together. In a Tumblr post, he wrote, "For Pearl's song, It's Over, Isn't It?, the scene is about Pearl accepting a loss. They started out with an outline for the scene. In it, basically, the writers describe what the scene is going to be. I'm going to leave a link to the Tumblr post so you can check it out in further detail there. But this outline is then given to the storyboard artist to bring it to life. He said, when we started storyboarding the episode, all of the rough demos of the songs were recorded so that we had an idea of the amount of time we had between each song. Rebecca remembered a part from the 1982 movie, Victor Victoria, starring Julie Andrews, that she wanted to use as reference for the feeling of the scene. Here's a scene from Victor Victoria, and here's a scene from Steven Universe. Do you notice how they're kind of similar? Johnson said, right away, we latched onto the spinning 360 camera move. I loved the energy and the focus it gave to the character, and I immediately roughed out the version with Pearl. I built the rest of the scene onward. I brought back motifs like her sword skills and her dance style to help evoke the past events of the series. I tried to give as much time as I could to each shot and make her acting as expressive as possible. At the end, I added a pause for when she throws the rose into the air. It felt like a good spot for things to crescendo and ring out. From there, he cleaned up the storyboards, and that was pretty straightforward. The scene didn't change that much except for some tweaking for her acting here and there. Joe Johnston was super proud of how the scene turned out and gave major props to Nick DeMaio, the animation director, Sunman Animation in Korea, where they actually drew the entire episode by hand. It's really cool getting a behind-the-scenes breakdown of how a Steven Universe scene comes together. One of the main lessons I learned from this is how to use inspiration and reference. Professionals are always using reference, and I think a lot of amateur and non-professional artists think it's cheating, but it's not. They were inspired by this really awesome scene and used some elements of it to make their scene really awesome too. It is no secret that How to Train Your Dragon is awesome. One of the elements in the movie that I feel like is somewhat overlooked though is the animation. It's good, like so good. Let's deep dive into the innovative techniques used by DreamWorks animators to make these dragons come to life. As you know, animators have been using reference since forever. If they want to create a realistic character, they bring in an actor, record them, and use that footage as a foundation for the animation. And when the character isn't human, they use animals. This techniques help create realistic, grounded animated performances. Now, when How to Train Your Dragon was started, they wanted to create realistic, awesome dragons that felt grounded. However, there was no real dragons to bring into the studio. So what do you do in a situation like this? This is Simon Otto, the head of character animation for How to Train Your Dragon. He created this technique called salad bowling to help bring these dragons to life.
One system that I came up with called Salad Bowl, the idea of collecting all kinds of ideas that are even remotely relevant and put them together in a movie. You know, for example, a bumblebee, a Harley Davidson, hummingbirds, and we kind of put them together. And not one single clip gives you the answer for everything, but the sum of all these pieces gives you a flavor of what this character could be like.
They would mix and match random reference and put them together to make one cohesive and unique dragon experience.
The Deadly Natter being a mixture between a T-Rex, a parrot, an ostrich. Monster's Nightmare is our more classical dragon, and but we looked at definitely long-necked birds were really big inspirations, and then a ton of predators. The hideous Sippleback is like, that gets really tricky. Like I think there's a two-headed snake that exists, and we looked at some of that. But Toothless, probably the biggest mix and match of all the dragons, because he's a black panther, bats, owls. There's a scene where he walks off the rock and he kind of crawls up to Hiccup, who's extending the fish, and he kind of goes sideways, and that was inspired by wallabies and wombats.
Animators did not stop there though. Once they figured out the reference they were going to use, they brought in a real-life biologist to help build these characters and make their designs as realistic as possible.
Most of the dragons that you see in How to Train Your Dragon, you have an enormous amount of biomechanical inspiration in real-life flight biomechanics, which flap sequences that the artist worked on with some of the animal inspiration, and you can see all the different iterations of the kind of body movement that went into this. And look at the rotation that takes place in Toothless's arm, just like the rotation that takes place in a bat's arm. That is superb biology. I can teach flight mechanics in a comparative animal anatomy class with How to Train Your Dragon. The reason it works is because the studio has decided that the biological inspiration for characters is a very potent tool for creating the differences in their characters.
So clearly the animators put a lot of work and research and time into creating the dragons. Even after combining all these different animals and consulting a scientist, the biggest inspiration behind one of Toothless's most famous moments is heartwarmingly simple.
There's a scene in the first How to Train Your Dragon where Toothless is mimicking Hiccup's smile, and it was just around the time when I had a baby. And I remembered that my son was sort of trying to smile, and it was kind of this weird. And we thought that was a great idea. Like, let's try and make Toothless do that.
For me, as an animator, the main takeaway of the story is you can combine a bunch of familiar things to make something 100% brand new. Dragons definitely don't exist, but the ones in the movie feel familiar because they have a strong foundation in real-life science. Breadwinners might be one of Nickelodeon's more controversial shows. When it first came out, people weren't really feeling it. And on first glance, I can kind of see why. It's loud, it's frantic, and there's a whole lot of butt stuff. The fans weren't digging it, and they got a lot of hate online. But we're in the animation industry, so we all know that any show getting made is a miracle and should be celebrated. I decided to take a look behind the scenes of Breadwinners, and I found some really cool and unique production processes they used on the show that are almost low-key genius. If anything, it's super creative. It turns out the entire show was built around music. It's kind of complicated, so I'm going to let the series creator explain the process.
We treat like the entire episode as if it's one long song. So we know it's a script-driven show, so the scripts are written, the dialogue is recorded with the actors, and we take that audio and we bring it into Pro Tools. Pro Tools is a musical program with bars and beats and a click track. So we pretty much take all the audio, all the dialogue, and we cut it up and we set it to a beat, and we put sound effects and like temp music. So everything is like locked to this grid, we call it.
Once the sound was locked, the storyboard artist would use that soundtrack to flesh out their boards, and then it would get animated and done. You're probably thinking, okay, what's the point of all this? Well, apparently, as a result, the show had a very unique feel, and people would actually react while watching it.
And it also creates this hypnotic kind of metronomic vibe. So you feel like you're listening to a song and you're always doing this.
When it was in development, we were picking it up. Everybody was doing this when they were watching the show. And it was like, what is that head nodding thing that...
I don't really know any other shows that have a production process like this. There are definitely some creative production processes, like, for example, this isn't even remotely the same, but on the Batman animated series, I know it was a big deal that they used black paper instead of white paper for their animation backgrounds, which helped contribute to that show's darker, more noir type vibe, which was cool. Another thing I know is that for the show Jellystone, the Yogi Bear reboot, something really cool was that they recorded the audio for the storyboard pitches, so the animatics actually had like a laugh track in there.
This thing's broken. No, you gotta do it like a food coma.
So it's kind of cool to actually have that recorded and even have the in-room laughter as the laugh track for the episode. But that was only for the animatic. This is the kind of creative thinking I wish was celebrated more in the animation community. If you want to see more quick doses of animation inspiration, check out these videos, and I'll see you guys in the next one.